We made it. Okay, we're past the boring stuff. All right, so we're going to get into the actual act of milling wood now. Okay, which is, I assume, why most of y'all are here. Is anyone here for not something besides this part? Yep, okay, good. I'm glad you stuck through it. So we're going to kind of follow this example here, that big log and this pile of wood through this process. So you have, before we can really talk about sawing, we have to talk a little more about the details of sawing, so we have like the same language. And really inconveniently, these words change depending where you are in the country and the world, even in the state. So these are my words that I like to use. And so if you adopt them, then maybe we can create a language for the Twin Cities metro area, which would be nice. Oh, box elder. Gorgeous, right? No one thought about that one. So you have the edge board. The edge board is the edge of the log, and it usually has bark on it. Like this had bark on it at one point. I didn't bring any with bark on still. But usually, like this one has usable wood on it, right? The edge board that I'm calling an edge board has no usable wood. It's basically like all bark. And so what are you going to do with all that bark? I don't know. Good luck selling it, because it'll just fall apart in your hands usually. And so that's kind of the edge board. That's your first cut on the log. You cut off the bark. Now you have cants. Cants are super cool because they're basically just big beams. You cut that log into, in this case, 3 big like rectangles. And then what defines a cant is you intend to saw it again later. So then you would saw those cants into smaller boards. So that's just a word. That's a cant. So cant has an intention of being sawed again later. A timber is basically just a cant that's not going to get sawed again. So it's just a beam. For timber frames you might have heard of, or like big posts and beams and stuff. I call them timbers or beams, you know. Either way. That's the difference between a cant and a timber, though, if we're going to saw it. A board is a dimensional piece of board. This little thing is a board under my definition. Okay? So now you have the different types of cutting. Plane sawing would be when you cut through like this, and you're kind of tangential to the log itself. So you'd have growth rings that go the long ways on the board. Mostly be this a ways. Okay. Quarter sawn is the opposite. You turn it 90 degrees. Now your growth rings go the short way. All right. It's the strongest and most stable, probably. Rift sawn is right in between there. They come out at some sort of angle. They're not square one way or square the other way. And there's standards depending on the mill and the cabinet shop or whoever is working with the wood. But generally, this is rift sawn. So, and then this is a term you might hear or see. It's called boxed heart. So in this case, you'd cut the log, cut all this into whatever, quarter sawn, rift sawn, plane sawn, and then you have the middle left. And we usually leave the middle like this because there's a lot of crazy drying forces and stuff in it. Like earlier, we talked about wood shrinkage and whatnot. If you cut part of this, look at all these rings and this, it's more than likely going to warp. But if you can get a perfectly square cut right around the pith, all the forces are equal and opposite on all sides. And so the odds of it actually warping are lower. Where you could cut, if you wanted to cut 6x6s out of this log, you could cut a 6x6 out of this corner. In this corner, you get 4 of them, but they're all going to have a little bit of pith in the corner, and all those 6x6s are going to shrink and swell in different spots and likely crack. And really depends who you talk to, different species, different parts of the country. They either want the corner one or they want the boxed heart. But if you're selling timbers and beams, you probably want to confirm with the client exactly which one it is. Okay, now we got our nomenclature. On to the actual act. So here we got a big pile of logs. How are we going to cut that all up? This is part of the planning process. I see these and I'm already starting to think, oh, these are nice, clean, clear 4 faces. It's red oak. Quarter sawn red oak's worth more than plain sawn or rift sawn red oak. And so this is, there's a lot of names for this, but somewhere in between there, plain sawn, through sawn, slabbing, of course, all heard flat sawn. You basically just cut the log like this, wham, 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 and you end up with a pile of wood with bark on the outside, and it's all next to itself. Okay, there's a time and a place for this. Then you have quarter sawn, the traditional method. You cut this log into quarters, and then you put this quarter on your mill, and you cut this piece. Then you turn it 90 degrees, and you cut this slightly shorter piece. And then you turn it 90 degrees, and you cut this even shorter piece. And then you turn it 90 degrees, and you cut that even shorter one. And you work your way all through the log. Does that sound laborious to anybody? Yes. Well, we'll show you a better way. Okay, this is kind of what that looks like, because you end up with bark on the one side, and then a nice clean cut on the other side. This is Baroque. You can see all the ray flecking. This is one of the reasons to quarter saw Baroque, is because everyone loves it. Very charismatic wood. It's also super stable, yada yada. But now, if I want like 1x4s, I have to go and cut these again and cut all the bark off. So more handling, more time, more equipment. So here's the method I like to use, because I run a bandsaw. That's an important caveat. I have a different type of saw. And so depending on your type of saw, you'll choose one of these or not. So I'll cut it into thirds like this, and then I'll put it up and I'll cut this and this off, and I'll turn this 90 degrees, and I'll get my quarter sawn or my plain sawn. So I'm making cants. So out of this log, I have 4 cants. And if I want all quarter sawn, I can get all quarter sawn. And then I have these things I call corner sawn, which are these corners, and I try to size them to get a 4x4 out of there. So now if I'm making a table, I got 4 legs, and I have a quarter sawn top, and I got plain sawn or quarter sawn bracing or whatever, all out of one log. And this is a lot of handling, but it's way less handling than the traditional quarter sawn on a bandsaw. You'll see this later. Then you got grade sawn. It's a combination of everything, and it requires by far the most handling, but if you have one log and you're trying to make the most possible usable cuts out of it, this is what you'll do. And so you basically cut for grade, cut the highest grade you can get out. The highest slab quality, you guys can correct me here, is right where the lines of the growth rings are roughly parallel all the way through, because that's the least likely to actually warp on you, the most stable cut. And then you box your heart, and then you got cants for quarter sawn stuff. You got your 4x4s, and then the C is a cant, so I'll cut that into like 2x4s, something like that. And then you got a smaller plain sawn for something else later, whatever. But each of those would be, in this particular example, the highest value relative to the log and the cut. So if I had to make a really nice table for somebody, this is how I'd make it. But it requires cut, turn, cut, turn, cut, turn, cut, turn, knock off bark. So there's a lot more handling and a lot more activity. It takes a lot longer to do this. But my end product can't get better. So you got to decide. Do you leave the bark on? Do you want bark on your slabs? You got to decide that before you start cutting, because bark's full of sand and debris, and it'll dull your blade really fast. It's also harder to handle, and it makes the thing wider and bigger. And so do you leave it on or do you take it off? Do you wash it? Do you brush it off with like a wire brush? You just got to think about that. So we got us a log, and we have an idea what we're going to turn it into. We're going to go and do that, cut it into a thing. Now we got our big pile of lumber here, and we're going to decide how to dry it. All right, so we're moving through this. We now can talk, about all of these different steps. Did we accurately grade it? Did we accurately scale it? We can confirm that now by measuring these. But what if somebody handed you a design and they want you to back calculate? Say, I want these dimensions, I want this size and this thing. Now you got to go back and do it in reverse. Well, I want this pile of wood, which means, oh, I also don't want bark, and I want like most of that. This is a grade sawn log, and then I need a log that big, which means I need this much scale on the log and that grade of a log. Back to log buyer now. So, forward and backwards.